When John de Balliol, the Lord of Bannock Castle, died in autumn 1268, his grieving widow had his heart removed. The heart was carefully preserved with spices, wrapped in cloth, and placed in an ivory casket. From that day on, the casket is never far from her. It sat beside her as she listened to petitions from anxious tenants. It rested on a table when she signed charters and seals documents, and that would shape the future of her lands, and of a small group of scholars in Oxford who will one day call their college Balliol. They sat by her trencher at supper and rode in her lap in a carriage that carried her from Dumfries to Carlisle and back again. Servants whispered that their lady spoke to it when she thought herself unobserved. Lady Dervorguilla of Galloway was not just a grieving widow. She was a woman from one of the most powerful bloodlines in Scotland. She and John had many children, and one of whom would later become John, King of Scots. John Balliol is undoubtedly the love of her life. She never remarried, determined to devote herself to the memory of the man she loved so deeply. Not only did she carry his heart for the next 2 decades, but in April 1273, 5 years after John's death, she issued a charter inviting sisters and monks from Dundrennan to found an abbey in his memory. It became known as Duce Cor, sweetheart in Latin, after the heart she kept so close. Sweetheart Abbey became the final resting place for them both. When Lady Dervorguilla passed away in 1289, she was laid to rest before the Abbey's high altar, with the heart of her beloved husband beside her, now in eternity. Giving a dead person's heart might sound like a dark Gothic romance. It seems strange, even unsettling by today's standard. But for centuries, heart preservation was a recognized ritual practice across Europe, especially among nobility. And Lady Dervorguilla was far from the only woman to keep her husband's heart so close that she took it to her grave. In 2013, excavations at a former Jacobin convent in Rennes, Brittany, uncovered a sealed lead coffin containing the remarkably preserved body of a 17th century's noble woman. Resting with her was a small, heart-shaped lead casket holding the embalmed heart of her husband, Dusan de Perrin. The woman was identified as Louise de Quengo, Lady of Brefayac. When her husband died in 1649, his body was buried at Carmelite convent he had founded, some 125 miles away. His heart, however, had been preserved and placed in a cardiotaph, and they would later be buried with Louise. Louise spent her widowhood in a Jacobin convent in Rennes. When she passed away 7 years later, her own heart was also removed, although it is unclear where it was taken. Many believed it was likely buried alongside her husband's body, a symbolic final exchange of hearts between the couple. Then there's a famous story of Mary Shelley, who kept what she believed to be her husband Percy Shelley's heart, wrapped in silk in the pages of his poem Adonais. She kept it in her desk drawer for almost 30 years after his cremation in 1822. And although she treasured it until her death in 1851, the heart was not buried with her at that time. It was only placed in a family vault 38 years later, when their son, Percy Florence Shelley, was laid to rest. But not every heart was kept for the sake of romance. Some were guarded for a different kind of love. In 1849, a woman boarded a train in Paris carrying a small silk crystal jar hidden beneath her cloak. Inside, preserved in alcohol, was the heart of her brother, the renowned composer Frédéric Chopin. For nearly 2 decades, Chopin had lived in exile. The unsuccessful Polish uprising against Russian rule in 1830 made it too dangerous for him to return, and he never saw his homeland again. But even from afar, his love for Poland never left him. It remained at the center of his identity, expressed through his music and his most intimate memories. In his final days, it is said that he requested his heart be returned to Poland. Chopin's sister, Louisa, carried the jar across multiple European borders, and from France, through the German states and into Russian-controlled Poland, risking confiscation at every checkpoint. She brought Poland's greatest musical son's heart back to Warsaw, where it was eventually placed inside a pillar of the Church of the Holy Cross. His body remained in Paris, but his heart, the part of him that had never left Poland, finally came home. But why the heart? For much of medieval and early modern Europe, the heart was seen as far more than a biological organ. It was believed it held emotion and memory, the very center of intelligence, as Aristotle put it. And much like the ancient Egyptians, Europeans thought the heart carried a record of who a person truly was. But instead of preserving it within the body, they often removed it, treating it as a distinct relic of identity. This belief led to the practice of separate heart burial, a privilege largely reserved for the higher social ranks for political and spiritual concerns. There were scattered examples between the 9th and 11th centuries, particularly among Ottonian and Salian rulers, who sometimes had organs buried separately. But the fully developed practice of heart burial became more common from the 12th century onwards, especially when death occurred far from home. For Crusaders, eviscerations was often necessary. The heart or entrails could then be sent to a chosen resting place. Louis IX of France, who died during the 8th Crusade, had his heart buried in Monreale Cathedral. Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, who drowned in the River Saleth during the 3rd Crusade, had his heart buried in Tarsus. Richard the Lionheart, killed during a siege in France, was also buried in divided form. His heart went to Rouen, his entrails were buried near the place of his death, and his body was laid to rest at Fontevraud Abbey. To us, this may sound dramatic, but at the time, it was often a practical solution to a very real logistical problem. But practicality was only part of the story. There were also spiritual and political motives. Medieval theology placed great symbolic weight on the heart. St. Augustine is often depicted with a flaming heart pierced by an arrow. And St. Teresa of Avila described a vision in which a seraph pierced her heart with a golden spear, and filling her with both intense pain and overwhelming sweetness of divine love. After her death, her heart was preserved as a major relic in Alba de Tormes, long believed to bear the wound of that divine encounter. Other parts of her body were distributed into Carmelite convents across Europe. And some nobles requested that their hearts be buried at pilgrimage sites and then never reach in life, as a way of completing a spiritual journey after death. And King Robert the Bruce famously asked for his heart to be taken to the Holy Land. Thirdly, the knight entrusted with it, Sir James Douglas, was killed in Spain during a campaign against the Moors, and before fulfilling the vow, the heart was returned to Scotland and buried at Melrose Abbey. The practice also reinforced dynastic claims and political authority. A ruler might have his heart buried in a political significant city to assert legitimacy or strengthen ties with the region. In this way, multiple places could claim a connection to him and pray for him and share in his prestige. French kings of the Capetian lines, especially the Valois branch, frequently used divided burial to project their presence across multiple sacred and political landscapes. With the Habsburgs, this practice became far more structured. For centuries, the members of the imperial family follow a formal three-part burial system. Bodies in the imperial crypt, hearts in a Herzoghof at the Augustinian church, and entrails in St. Stephen's Cathedral. And by the 19th century, divided burial had become rare, but the heart burial itself never vanished entirely. It survived as a deeply symbolic gesture, and one of the most recent examples came in July 2011, when Otto von Habsburg, the last crown prince of Austria-Hungary, requested that his heart be buried separately at the Abbey of Pannonhalma in Hungary. Today, we no longer remove the heart after death, unless, of course, it is safe and not alive. But it remains our most powerful metaphor for feeling and identity. We talked about having a change of heart, or a heart of gold. And we thank people from the bottom of our heart, and we say someone has broken it. And now, with just a tap, we send a little heart emoji across the screen. And if you could choose a place for your heart to belong, where would that be?